Hi everyone. This is the Mills Verbal Fortune Teller. It was made around 1907. They made it, it appears for a couple of years, was promoted probably through 1909, made by Mills Novelty Company of Chicago, Illinois. Mills was one of the two major producers of coin-operated equipment back in the day. Mills was out of Chicago, as I said, and there was the Cale brothers out of Detroit. Those were the two major makers of arcade game coin-operated devices at the time. This was probably definitely their highest dollar product and their most spectacular machine. It came at a very high price. They were charging about $750 for this machine, and it was huge too. It's about 400 pounds, over 7 feet tall. And so if we think about that and the amount of time it would take, the amount of money it would take in pennies or nickels to collect to pay for this game, it would take probably a year or two, even at the busiest amusement parks, because you'd have to make at least $2 a day to pay it off in a year. That would be 200 plays, of course. So it's really basically what we're saying here. It was only for the top amusement parks that have huge crowds that could make this game pay its way off. But if we look at it, it would be a great piece at the entrance to an arcade, a great calling card to people that come and visit. And so in that way, probably a lot of amusement parks said, let's pick one up so we have the biggest and the best. I'll probably get to do a quick demo of the fortune teller, and then we'll dig into a bit, just for people that just want to see it operate, and then we'll dig into some of the basics of operation, and for the people who are more interested in the nitty gritty of how things work and things. So the verbal, if we look at the cabinet, just talk about that for a second. If you guys want to Google the term Vardo, V-A-R-D-O, that is the name for old gypsy wagons back in the 1800s. Gypsies would travel from town to town, and they would have the back of their wagon would open up, a door would open up, and they had the lanterns on the side typically, and then the fortune teller, the gypsy, would sit in the back, and people would step up to the window, and she would tell their fortune. And so Mills kind of stylized that gypsy wagon, as we can see here, which they did a great job on. And if we look at the side, we can see that the wagon wheels are there to represent the rear of the wagon. So if you look that up and take a look at what gypsy wagons looked like, I think they actually did a great job of representing what an actual gypsy wagon would look like. So let's go over to the machine itself. There's the gypsy. She speaks fortune. So this was a radical difference between the early fortune tellers in that period were typically into vending cards. Actually, there weren't that many fortune tellers out there, but there were some, and they vended cards that would tell you a fortune. But in this case, she would actually speak the fortune, which was really novel at the time. It's penny operation. This one, they made it for penny or nickel. This is, I guess I didn't say that in advance, kind of going off the cuff here. This is a reproduction of the original verbal fortune teller. There's only one known to exist, complete game in Virginia City, Montana. And you can Google Virginia City fortune teller, and it'll bring up lots of information about their machine. And we visited there years ago, and I'll discuss that after I show the demonstration, tell you some stories about our whole process. Anyways, it operates on penny, and we can see we have the men's side and the ladies' side. So it's pretty cool because she will turn her head once you put a coin on either side and lift that tube up. She will speak to you. These are speaking tubes. They were very common, what she's speaking into, called a speaking tube. They were very common in Victorian mansions of the day, so people would have known what was going on. So we see she speaks into the tube. Her voice comes down through the tube, out the front, and down to the end of the speaking tube that you would put up to your ear to listen to. So let's have the gypsy speak to you. I'm going to put the earpiece up to the microphone area of or the speaker area of the phone. Hopefully you can get enough of a sense of the audio on this, but I think it will work, so let's give it a shot. There you hear the voice from 1907. So that's the demo of the verbal fortune teller. Hope you liked it. Hang in after this if you want, and I will really get into a discussion of stories about building this and how the machine totally works. Thanks. So the machine, it says, "Your fortune told by the human voice." It was originally called, of course, called the verbal fortune teller by the company, and actually the marquee actually originally said verbal fortune teller on top, at least in the promotional materials. I think they probably took that off because a lot of people were not highly educated back in the day, and the word verbal may not have made sense. People wouldn't understand what that is. So they tried to simplify it by just telling the text of what the gypsy would actually tell you. If we look at the wood, we have great figural quarter-sawn oak throughout the machine. You can see on the sides, we kind of hand-picked all the wood. And we have a nice curved door on the front, which is really cool. Even the wheels, we tried to get very similar wood to the original. Again, they had a lot of great wood to choose from back then, and the quarter-sawn oak is such a great look. If we look at the side, here we have a cash box, and we've kind of aged it up to look period. I have some pennies in there. There's actually a cash box on both sides of the machine because we have the coin slot on both sides, we can see. Let's go over to here too. Same thing, we have the cash box there as well with the padlocks on to keep those coins safe. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the why we went on this crazy project. This is back, we're going back to about 2008. We went, a friend of mine, Ron Gaukel, collector friend, and myself, we were aware of the types of games. They had a number of penny arcade games out at Virginia City, Montana. And it's a very cool place to visit if you guys ever get a chance. I think you'd enjoy it. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but a fun drive. And we knew they had a good collection of early penny arcade machines and some early slot machines and things like that in their old town, which is essentially kind of a ghost town. You could read about the history of that. A fellow named Charlie Bovee started up the town as a tourist location back in the 40s, inspired by Knott's Berry Farm, and it kind of expanded from there. So it's not super busy these days, but a cool place to visit if you get a chance to get through there in Montana. Anyways, we had heard about the fortune teller, and we're really interested in seeing this. I'm very into coin-op history and have a lot of documentation regarding that. And I reached out to the curator at the time in Virginia City, and we had some discussions about how I could help them regarding information on some of their machines. So I gathered up that information, and then we decided to take a trip out there and see what was going on. So we, when we got out there, of course, we were blown away by the fortune teller. Well, actually, let me back up just a little bit. On the way out there, we were driving through Deadwood, South Dakota, and I had the idea of calling up another collector friend, Tim Leganke, and told him, I asked him, guess where we're going? And of course, he had no clue, but then I told him, and he got very excited and said, listen, Larry, why don't you gather all the information you can on it, get photos, measurements, get all the information you can, document everything on the fortune teller, because a fellow named John Papa and I want to recreate that fortune teller. And which was really cool. John Papa has done quite a number of recreations of early penny arcade, and we thought that would be pretty cool. But for our efforts, we had kind of talked to Tim about getting a game for each of us, a machine for each of us at their cost. And he agreed to that. And so we had this extra bonus of, hey, we can actually, we can get a verbal fortune teller. So we got out there, and a really cool place. We stayed at the old hotel in town, which the building was taken from Yosemite Park way back. And so it's a really cool historic town, very, very fun, at least for us. We enjoyed it. And we met with the curator and gave her the information we had on various machines she had. And then she allowed us access to the fortune teller. And it was kind of lucky at the time. The fortune teller had just come back from a restoration by a fellow named John Cajelland. He did a sympathetic restoration to the machine, and cleaning up the wood and the materials inside and kind of restoring it. But some issues there. We'll get into that a bit later in the story. But anyways, he did a restoration for them, and the machine was still sitting in a warehouse they had in Virginia City, not shown to the public. They were going to do that down the road. So we were there at a perfect time where it was very accessible for us to look inside and dig around and try to get an understanding of how this great machine actually worked and document all the information we could on it. So we completed that, getting all the information, and we got home. I sent the images, some of the images onto John Papa, and we spoke a few days later, and he said, "Larry, you got to be crazy. I would never make a machine like that. It would never be financially feasible. It's so involved that the cost of building this thing, and we'd never make money. We just couldn't. At too much time, we couldn't do it." And we were very disappointed by that, Ron and I, because we really wanted a machine. And so as time went by, we were looking at all the photos and kind of and measurements and everything, and kind of thinking about how this thing was built. And we got more and more interested in, hey, how did they do this? How did they accomplish this? Because the actual mechanism for the fortune teller of Virginia City is pretty messed up. As I was alluding to earlier, John Cajelland had tried to, quote, fix the mechanism so it would actually function. And in the process, he really created a really bad situation. And I advised the curator at the time, I said, do not ever run this machine because it'll probably break the fortune teller, the fortune teller's head, because its paper mache is fairly sensitive and it would fling her head around very violently and potentially damage the machine. So we, after months of talking about this, we decided to just do it ourselves. We knew it'd be a lot of time involved in that. And so we just said, well, we got to do it because we want this thing bad. So that started us on a journey that really took about 4 years to complete this. Thousands of hours were put into this. So many hours into the design, the shaping, the sourcing of parts. Got pretty crazy, but we were able to actually accomplish the mission. And I'll talk a little bit about just kind of the components of this and how we got through some of that. This sign itself was actually the quarter-sawn oak. I like this a lot. This came from an actual old piano, a destroyed piano. I was able to pull a panel off the piano to get some really early, and better image when you see it, of course, but to get some a great grain of quarter-sawn for that sign. So I usually use that. A friend of mine is a genius cabinet maker, excellent wood shop person, and he made the cabinets for us. Of course, we had all the measurements and everything. We found an excellent sculptor, and he was able to do, because we just had visual images, right? We had to create everything from the photos we had and the documentation, the measurements and such. So the lamps you see here, and actually all the metal pieces are all the end treatments. They are all nickel-plated cast iron. Everything, we try to do everything as close to original as we could. So the lamps, which typically you found on the gypsy wagons, nickel-plated cast iron, as I said. Very interesting here, and how they did that too was a real challenge, because as we can see, there's no wires on the outside. Kind of a stunt there. There's the electric the bulb. You can see the wires there coming in. We had the cloth covered wire. It actually comes through the bottom of this chamber. This is a hollowed out path on the bottom of this bracket that goes down into the machine to bring the power to the bulb. But it's really a cool look and a great design aspect of how they accomplish that. Speaking of the, what do we have up there? I see an old bulb up there. I can see a little bit of the what's going on. I'm going to actually, let's see, I'm going to lift this up. I can't see what's going on, but hopefully you'll get a sense of this. This is exactly the same as the original was wired, the configuration. This is called knob and tube construction. If you look at houses in the turn of the century, knob and tube was a very popular method. You could research it. Basically, it keeps the two wires generally separate, and when it's going through walls and such, and there are actually porcelain tubes that go through the wood, and each tube would have one wire. So if you look in the back of the machine, unfortunately, I can't move it to show you that part of it, but the knobs, it has tubes and knobs all over, guiding the wire to the places it should be. All right, so that's that. On the inside, again, we can see some of the wiring there. The light fixtures were very interesting. We had to reconstruct. This is a tin. All the thin metal we used on this, we had to actually buy steel, very thin steel to the right size, and then tin plate it because we wanted to really get original, and we used some of that metal in other uses as well that we needed the plating. So we had to do the bending and soldering and everything to fashion these light shades. The shades were silk. John Cagellan did the research on that, so we had color matching. We could come up with the same colors as the original. These beads are Czechoslovakian silver-plated beads. We were able to source. The same ones are still being made after all these years. We actually, the tassels, all this product, the velvet curtains, these tie-off ropes, we made everything virtually identical to the original. It was quite a job sourcing, people that, hey, I'm going to make us some tassels, right? Make us these end pieces. And we found a company that did this stuff and did a great job on that. The paper mache hands were kind of a thing you see in some of the other mills, fortune tellers, that type of thing, the paper mache little emblems of fortunes and things. Early playing cards around the period, we laid those in. These are actually laid the exact same as same cards in the same positions as the one in Montana. The brackets for the speaking tubes were really kind of a fun deal because we actually hammered those ourselves. Hammered. We put in the rivets and bent everything ourselves to match the original exactly to hold the speaking tubes. The tubes were a real challenge, and this is kind of the fun, the fun of building this project, but then also the challenge of creating all these things or finding people to help us build these things. The speaking tubes were made by a fellow in New Hampshire who was a genius metal spinner. And so this is all spun metal. That's a very interesting process. We found out about all these things. We had no idea about the old school ways of doing it, but spun metal is still done in some ways, but it's a very early thing for making cups and such, and he did a fantastic job, just virtually identical. Actually, I would say that the verbal fortune teller in Montana, as I said, does not function. They're missing the outside tubes, unfortunately. And so they were broken off over the years. This is actually a cloth-covered spring, so we had to source someone to weave the cloth to make the sheath for the spring, and there's a wound spring inside of this, so it's very flexible, right? This is all these process things we had to work on that were very challenging. We've sourced a lot of that stuff. Let's move down the way here. Let's see. Yeah, let's move into how she gets her voice. It's very interesting. Actually, let me show you another operation here while we're up here. Turn on a flashlight here so we can see get a dot there. Okay. So the fortune teller not only speaks with a voice so you can hear it, but her eyes move and her teeth and tongue move as well, which is really, really pretty cool. Unless you have a kind of a lighter situation she's in, you won't see it so much. But we're going to give you, we built it up exactly the same as the original, so I'll give you an indication of this. So you can see an example of her teeth and her tongue moving. Get a better image for you there. Hopefully that's caught on the video, all right? So, in all these things, it was crazy the detail we went into. We can see we have the fashioned collar that she had that allows the head to move without showing, you know, any of that little gap in there with the neck and such. Just a great job by them, and fashioning these things were crazy. To make this beading here, we had to hand hammer each of those rounds on this thing with a cut brass, and then hammer all those rounds, because it kind of became a factory, an old school factory, right? Nobody makes the stuff anymore, so we had to do it. Okay, so let's go down into the place where the action is, down into the guts of the machine. Door to the side. All right, let's get a light over here so we can see better. Okay, so here is how everything works. The, let's see, I'll go this way. Her voice is accomplished by 2-cylinder record players. We can see there. These are nice, and these are pretty cool. They're all chromy and everything, which they really didn't need inside a cabinet like this. But this is a very unique cylinder player. These are Columbia BG cylinder record players. They were made right in that period, 1907-ish, and a very interesting model because at the time, Edison and Columbia were the main competitors on record players, on cylinder record players. And at the time, then Edison produced a 2-minute cylinder. Well, Columbia had just come out with this new version, kind of upping the ante. They produced, and the Edison cylinders were 4 inches long, so they got basically 2 minutes from 4 inches of record. Well, Columbia had the genius idea of, well, let's do a 3-minute cylinder. We'll beat the competition significantly. So they did a 6-inch long cylinder versus a 4 from Edison, and they were able to cram that extra 2 inches of playtime on there. So now we had a 3-minute cylinder. And that worked perfect for, timing is everything on that. And Mills said, we need, a bunch of fortunes for this, our fortune teller. So they purchased a whole lot of uncompleted, unboxed machines from Columbia, the cylinder players. And they got to work on designing this thing, how they could make this work. And what they came up with was actually a patented device. So let's see, I think we can get a good visual of it here. So the brass mechanism, you see this construction arm, I'm kind of waving it rather than pointing because I don't have a finger to point at that. Actually, I got one, that arm right there, it's a pivoting arm. That whole assembly that goes over here was a Mills patented device. They came up with a method of playing for short periods of time, playing words from a or from a cylinder record player and stopping. And that was their patent to do that. And they did it specifically for the verbal, and so they patented the device. So let's look at how this works. So cylinder record players play in a horizontal fashion, right? The grooves are on the record, it spins, and the needle of the record, which we can see over here, will actually